Picture this, the 1960s, an era when laughter ruled the living room and sitcoms were America's nightly comfort. But for every classic that thrived, countless others were quietly erased. Some shows were canceled mid-episode, others vanished overnight without warning or explanation. Behind the laughter lay studio feuds, moral panics, and cold-blooded business decisions. Tonight we reopen the vault to expose 15 1960s sitcoms canceled overnight and ask one haunting question: what really went wrong? Number 15, The Baileys of Balboa, 1964. When The Baileys of Balboa premiered on CBS, it looked like a surefire hit. Set on the sunny California coast, the show followed a stubborn charter boat captain named Sam Bailey, who constantly clashed with wealthy yacht club elites. It was meant to be CBS's answer to Gilligan's Island, a comedy about class conflict on the water. But while Gilligan became a legend, the Baileys sank fast. The trouble started even before the pilot aired. The show's creator, Keith Brissell, was a close friend of CBS programming chief James Aubrey. Insiders whispered that the show wasn't chosen for quality, but as a personal favor. When the press caught wind of that connection, CBS was embarrassed. Critics accused the network of corruption. Viewers, meanwhile, couldn't figure out the tone. Was it satire? Was it slapstick? Or was it just confused? Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Writers rewrote scripts daily, trying to make the characters likable, while sponsors demanded a cleaner family image. Crew members claimed the atmosphere on set was tense, with executive notes flooding in by the hour. The show's blue-collar humor clashed with the network's increasingly sanitized image. Then suddenly one night, CBS pulled the plug. No finale, no warning, just silence. Only 13 episodes aired before the network quietly erased its existence. In the years that followed, The Baileys of Balboa became a Hollywood ghost story, a symbol of how television power politics could destroy even the most promising ship before it left the dock. Number 14, My Living Doll, 1964. In 1964, CBS introduced one of the strangest sitcoms of the decade, My Living Doll. It starred Bob Cummings as a psychiatrist who becomes guardian to a female robot named Rhoda, played by the mesmerizing Julie Newmar. The series combined futuristic science fiction with domestic comedy, promising laughs through man-machine misunderstandings, but what seemed innovative turned into a nightmare for everyone involved. The public was initially curious. The show's glossy sets and playful tone drew attention, yet critics felt uneasy. Many thought the humor felt cold and mechanical, like the robot at its center. Still, it might have survived had it not been for the storm brewing backstage. Cummings and Newmar were polar opposites. He wanted a traditional sitcom about a wise man guiding a woman. She wanted something more. Mysterious, playful, and bold. Their clashes were constant. Crew members later said Cummings refused to speak to Newmar during filming. Halfway through the season, Cummings abruptly quit. CBS was horrified. They scrambled to rewrite the show, giving supporting characters more screen time, but audiences had already fled. Ratings collapsed. Within days, CBS executives made a quiet decision to cancel. The last episodes aired with little fanfare and were gone from schedules overnight. Decades later, My Living Doll resurfaced as a cult favorite among collectors who admired its bizarre charm and ahead-of-its-time ideas about technology and identity. But in 1964, it was simply too strange, too uncomfortable, and too unstable for prime time. A comedy about perfection destroyed by imperfection behind the camera. Number 13, It's About Time, 1966. Few sitcoms better capture 1960s chaos than It's About Time. Created by Sherwood Schwartz, the same mind behind Gilligan's Island, it told the story of two astronauts who accidentally travel back to prehistoric times and must survive among cavemen. On paper, it sounded like comedy gold. In practice, it was one of television's strangest disasters. Audiences were intrigued at first. Cavemen jokes, Stone Age sets, and slapstick chaos filled the early episodes. But the humor was repetitive. Critics complained that the show looked cheap and sounded dumber with every week. Schwartz grew desperate. In a bold and baffling move, he flipped the concept halfway through the season. The astronauts repaired their ship and brought the cavemen back to the modern world. Overnight, the show's premise was reversed. Instead of fixing the problem, it made everything worse. Viewers were bewildered. The time travel twist was confusing, and continuity vanished. Ratings fell faster than any CBS executive could track. Behind closed doors, panic spread. The network had invested heavily in sets, costumes, and advertising only to face ridicule in the press. Crew members later recalled that scripts were rewritten hours before filming, and morale was collapsing. Then, one Friday afternoon, the cast showed up to find production halted No warning, no farewell. The show was canceled overnight. Schwartz later admitted it was one of his greatest missteps, a series killed by too much ambition and too little direction. Years later, It's About Time found a small cult audience who appreciated its absurd energy. But in 1966, it was proof that even a successful creator could fall victim to the merciless speed of television. In the industry's eyes, the Stone Age had claimed another victim. Number 12, The Cara Williams Show, 1964. At a glance, The Cara Williams Show looked like another cheerful family sitcom built for mid-60s optimism. Cara Williams was already a television darling, known for her sparkling energy and comedic timing. CBS believed her new show about a divorced woman secretly married to a coworker would be a refreshing twist. Instead, it became a scandal that the network didn't want to explain. The story followed Cara and her husband Frank, who worked together at a government agency that forbids employees from marrying each other. Their entire life revolved around hiding the truth from their bosses and coworkers. It was meant to be farce, lighthearted, and fun, but America in 1964 wasn't ready for a sitcom about deception and marriage rules. Some newspapers called it immoral, while conservative groups protested its premise. Behind the curtain, pressure mounted. The writers wanted sharper humor, but CBS demanded more wholesome content. Cara Williams clashed with producers over scripts and character tone. She was proud of the show and frustrated when executives constantly interfered. Audience numbers dropped. CBS tried changing time slots, then cut the advertising budget. One winter morning, the cast arrived to find filming canceled and their contracts voided. No warning, no farewell episode. The show simply disappeared from air as if erased. In later interviews, Williams admitted she felt blindsided and heartbroken. The Cara Williams Show remains a strange artifact of changing times when television struggled to balance modern ideas with old-fashioned fear. It dared to show love in secret, but paid the price for being too far ahead of its era. Number 11, The Tammy Grimes Show, 1966. The Tammy Grimes Show was supposed to make history. Tammy Grimes, the Tony Award-winning Broadway actress, was brought to television with huge expectations. ABC billed her as the next big sitcom queen, but when the series premiered, it collapsed in spectacular fashion and was yanked off air so quickly that even critics were stunned. The show followed Grimes as Tamantha Dunn, a free-spirited heiress who rejects her fortune and tries to live an ordinary life. It had everything: lavish sets, witty dialogue, and big-name producers. Yet the tone was confusing. Was it a satire or a screwball comedy? Audiences couldn't tell. Critics called it frantic, self-indulgent, and exhausting to watch. Behind the scenes, chaos ruled. Grimes, who was brilliant on stage, struggled with the tight schedule of television. Scripts were rewritten constantly. Some claimed she refused direction. Others said she was simply overwhelmed by a project that didn't suit her personality. Her co-stars felt lost. Director William D. Russell described the set as total confusion with no clear vision. ABC executives panicked after only 4 episodes. Ratings were catastrophic, and sponsor complaints poured in. Within a single week, the network made its decision. The show was canceled before half its episodes were even aired. The Tammy Grimes Show became one of the shortest-lived sitcoms in television history. Its cancellation was so sudden that newspapers joked it ended before viewers could learn the character's name. Today, it's remembered as a lesson in how star power can't save a show without focus. For Tammy Grimes, it marked the end of her television dreams. The network erased her experiment overnight, leaving behind a mystery about how such high hopes could sink so fast. Number 10, The Hathaways, 1961. If ever a sitcom felt cursed, it was The Hathaways. Premiering on ABC in 1961, the show featured a suburban couple who act as guardians to 3 chimpanzees trained for show business. It was pitched as wholesome family entertainment, but what aired was so bizarre that even network executives pretended it never happened. The premise alone baffled viewers. Jack Weston and Peggy Cass played Walter and Eleanor Hathaway, who treat the chimps like their own children, dressing them in clothes, feeding them dinner, and teaching them manners. The laugh track roared as the animals smashed furniture and tossed food. Critics were merciless, calling it embarrassing and surreal. Behind the scenes, the chaos was worse. The chimps were unpredictable, sometimes dangerous. Trainers warned that filming would be impossible, but the producers insisted on pushing forward. Each episode took weeks to complete as the animals destroyed props or refused to cooperate. Crew members complained about constant delays and foul odors from the set. ABC executives watched in horror as the show's ratings collapsed. Sponsors fled almost immediately. Some affiliates refused to air certain episodes, claiming they made television look ridiculous. Within just 1 season, ABC canceled it without ceremony. For decades, The Hathaways was considered one of the worst sitcoms ever made. Few episodes survive today, and most were buried in archives never re-released. Yet in a strange way, Its failure became legendary, a perfect storm of misguided optimism and chaotic production. In an age when networks could erase mistakes overnight, the Hathaways vanished, leaving only whispers of laughter that no one found funny. Number 9, Mr. Terrific, 1967. In the mid-60s, superheroes were everywhere, from comic books to Saturday morning cartoons, and CBS wanted a slice of the craze. The result was Mr. Terrific, a half-hour comedy about a timid gas station attendant who gains temporary super strength from a government-issued pill. It was meant to parody the growing superhero obsession and cash in on the success of Batman. Instead, it became one of the shortest-lived caped comedies in television history. Stephen Strimple starred as Stanley Beamish, a mild-mannered everyman who transformed into the bumbling hero Mr. Terrific whenever he swallowed his power pill. The premise was absurdly fun, but the execution fell flat. The humor was gentle when audiences wanted wild. The flying effects looked clumsy, and critics complained that even the laugh track sounded tired. CBS had scheduled it opposite NBC's The Man from UNCLE, and the ratings were crushed before the first commercial break. Behind the scenes, morale plummeted. The writers were ordered to make the show more like Get Smart. Then, days later, told to tone down the spy elements entirely. Props malfunctioned, stunts went wrong, and Strimple struggled to balance the physical comedy with the show's inconsistent tone. Within a few months, CBS gave up. The network canceled it overnight after just 17 episodes. For a brief moment, Mr. Terrific was supposed to make America laugh at superheroes. Instead, it made executives terrified of them. Today, it survives only in scattered reruns and trivia lists, a forgotten cape fluttering in television's lost wind. My Mother the Car, 1965. When people talk about the strangest sitcoms ever made, My Mother the Car always drives to the top of the list. Premiering on NBC in 1965, it told the story of a man whose deceased mother is reincarnated as a talking antique car. Yes, a car that speaks through the radio. Even in a decade filled with bizarre ideas, this one shocked audiences. The show starred Jerry Van Dyke as attorney Dave Crabtree, who discovers that his mother's spirit now lives inside a 1928 Porter convertible. She guides him through life, offering advice and motherly scolding through the car's dashboard speaker. Producers promoted it as family-friendly fantasy, but critics called it absurd beyond belief. Behind the scenes, NBC executives were uneasy from the start. The concept had come from a group of writers trying to outdo the success of Bewitched and Mr. Ed, but it went too far. Van Dyke later admitted he took the role only after turning down Gilligan's Island, something he regretted forever. Production was chaotic. The car malfunctioned constantly. Recording the voiceovers required endless retakes. Crew members described the set as cursed with constant breakdowns and bad morale. When the show aired, public reaction was immediate and brutal. Newspapers labeled it the dumbest idea ever put on television. NBC canceled it after one season. Over time, My Mother the Car became a cult symbol of television gone wrong. Scholars now view it as a fascinating example of mid-60s experimentation gone mad. What was meant as heartwarming became unintentionally eerie, a comedy that proved not every strange idea deserves airtime. Number 7, The Pruitts of Southampton, 1966. Imagine a glamorous socialite losing her fortune overnight and pretending she's still rich to avoid embarrassment. That was the setup of The Pruitts of Southampton, later renamed The Phyllis Diller Show. It starred comedian Phyllis Diller as the eccentric matriarch of a bankrupt family living in a mansion they can no longer afford. On paper, it sounded like pure comedic gold. ABC executives saw it as a female version of the Beverly Hillbillies flip upside down, but the execution was chaotic. Diller's sharp stage humor clashed with the show's attempt at family-friendly storytelling. Writers struggled to balance her biting wit with network restrictions. Early reviews were brutal, calling the series shrill, disorganized, and painfully unfunny. Behind the scenes, tensions ran high. Diller was frustrated by endless rewrites and restrictions on her trademark sarcasm. Crew members recalled the constant interference from producers who couldn't decide if the show should be a parody of Wealth or a warm-hearted sitcom. Ratings dropped fast. ABC made desperate changes, even rebranding it halfway through its run. The title was shortened and the tone softened, but nothing worked. Sponsors lost interest, and affiliates began dropping it from local schedules. Finally, the network killed it mid-season without warning. In later interviews, Phyllis Diller laughed about its failure, calling it the most expensive flop of her career. Yet for historians, The Pruitts of Southampton stands as a snapshot of 60s excess, a show that tried to be everything and ended up nothing. Its overnight cancellation proved that even star power couldn't save a sinking mansion built on shaky comedic ground. Number 6. The Double Life of Henry Phyfe, 1966. When ABC premiered The Double Life of Henry Phyfe, they hoped for a witty spy comedy to ride the wave of James Bond mania sweeping the mid-60s. Instead, they got confusion, disappointment, and one of the swiftest cancellations in spy sitcom history. The show starred Red Buttons as Henry Phyfe, an ordinary accountant who is recruited by a secret government agency after a spy who looks identical to him is killed in action. At first, the premise sounded clever. A mild-mannered man forced to lead a double-life balancing office drudgery with dangerous espionage missions. But the writing wobbled between parody and seriousness. One week it spoofed spy films, the next it played like a melodrama. Viewers didn't know whether to laugh or yawn. Behind the scenes, the tone was a nightmare to control. Producers argued daily about direction while Red Buttons grew increasingly frustrated. He was a talented comedian, trapped in a show that didn't understand comedy. Ratings were disastrous. Critics labeled it a muddled identity crisis in half-hour form. Then came the final blow. ABC executives watched the third episode and decided it was unsalvageable. Within 48 hours, they ordered it canceled. Crew members were stunned. Sets were dismantled before the cast even got their final paycheck. Today, few remember Henry Phyfe, yet television historians see it as an early warning about network panic. In a decade obsessed with spies and secret agents, this was the show that revealed how fragile trends could be. One false identity, and you were erased overnight. Number 5. The Ugliest Girl in Town, 1968. Few sitcoms in history crashed harder than The Ugliest Girl in Town. Premiering on ABC during a cultural revolution, it told the bizarre story of a man who disguises himself as a woman to work as a London fashion model. What was meant as silly escapism became an instant disaster, drawing outrage from critics and confusion from viewers. The story followed Timothy Blair, a Hollywood talent agent who accidentally becomes famous as a female model named Tammy. The absurdity was deliberate, but the jokes fell flat. Audiences found it mean-spirited, while others simply couldn't follow the premise. British viewers were particularly offended by its portrayal of London fashion life. Behind the curtain, the production was chaos. The show was filmed partly in England and plagued with technical mishaps. Scripts were rewritten overnight, and actors struggled to keep a straight face during filming. Even the network executives admitted they didn't know how to market it. Was it satire, farce, or mockery? When early reviews hit the newspapers, ABC executives panicked. Ratings tanked almost immediately. Affiliates began dropping the show from their schedules. With little warning, ABC canceled the series after just a few months, leaving several episodes unaired. In later years, The Ugliest Girl in Town became infamous as one of the strangest sitcoms ever produced. It appeared briefly on lists of television's biggest blunders and then vanished. To this day, few people have seen a full episode. Its failure marked the end of an era when networks believed any idea could succeed if it was outrageous enough. The public proved otherwise. Number 4. The New Phil Silvers Show, 1963. Phil Silvers was a comedy legend. His series, The Phil Silvers Show from the 1950s, had been a smash hit. So when CBS brought him back in, The New Phil Silvers Show, expectations were sky high, but lightning refused to strike twice. What began as a comeback quickly collapsed into embarrassment and cancellation. This time, Silvers played Sergeant Ernie Bilko's civilian counterpart, a factory foreman, with a knack for scheming and manipulating his workers. The network believed audiences would love his familiar conman persona in a modern setting. Instead, they found it cold and repetitive. The charm of Bilko's barracks humor didn't translate to corporate America. Production was troubled from the start. Silvers disliked the scripts and rewrote much of his own dialogue. Directors struggled to keep him focused as the schedule fell behind. Crew members described exhaustion and confusion as writers tried to recapture the old magic. Critics were brutal. They accused CBS of recycling old jokes and exploiting nostalgia. Viewers agreed. Ratings sank after only a handful of episodes. CBS attempted a mid-season revamp, but nothing worked. By spring 1964, the show was pulled with no announcement or finale. Years later, Phil Silvers confessed he regretted returning to television so soon. The failure haunted him, and for a time, his reputation suffered. The New Phil Silvers Show now stands as a warning that even comedy legends can't outwit changing times. What once felt brilliant suddenly seemed out of place. The cancellation came overnight, but the lesson lasted a lifetime. Number 3. Turn On, 1969. Turn On was meant to revolutionize television. ABC billed it as the next step beyond Laugh-In, a sketch comedy show so fast-paced that even the network's own executives could barely keep up. It combined political satire animation and electronic music music, all cut together in a dizzying blur of flashing lights and surreal gags. But within minutes of its premiere, ABC affiliates were pulling the plug mid-broadcast. The show's concept was bold. It took the formula of laugh-in and replaced human warmth with mechanical rhythm. There was no audience, no laugh track, just a barrage of visual jokes delivered by strange, computerized transitions. Viewers sat stunned, unsure whether to laugh or panic. Reports flooded ABC stations describing angry calls and protests. Behind the scenes, creators George Schlatter and Ed Friendly insisted they were making the future of television a new kind of humor that reflected the machine age, but sponsors were horrified. One described the show as a computerized nightmare. During its very first broadcast in Cleveland, the local station cut transmission after 15 minutes, calling it offensive and confusing. ABC executives were already facing pressure from affiliates in conservative states who threatened to drop the network entirely if turn-on continued. Within 24 hours, ABC canceled it. Only one episode aired. The show disappeared so quickly that few even remember seeing it. Yet today, television historians view Turn On as a symbol of the cultural turbulence of 1969, a year when boundaries were tested and instantly punished. It dared to imagine humor without emotion and paid the price for being too far ahead of the world it mocked. Turn On wasn't just canceled overnight, it was erased from existence. Number 2, The New Monkees, 1968. When NBC tried to revive the lightning of youth culture with The New Monkees, they misread the room entirely. The original Monkees had been a phenomenon, part comedy, part rock fantasy, and part marketing miracle. But by 1968, that era was already fading. The youth movement had grown darker, more rebellious, and less trusting of corporate television. NBC, however, forged ahead with a new version. The network envisioned 4 new young faces, more polished and hipper, starring in a surreal sitcom filled with songs, skits, and slapstick chaos. But the chemistry was gone. Viewers saw it as a hollow imitation. The music lacked heart, and the comedy felt forced. Critics accused NBC of trying to cash in on a cultural wave that had already passed. Behind the scenes, the tension was brutal. The new cast members resented being compared to the original Monkees, who were beloved by millions. Writers struggled to create material that captured 60s energy without offending anyone. NBC executives kept interfering, demanding more musical numbers and fewer jokes. The production crew later described the atmosphere as desperate, with morale collapsing episode by episode. When ratings plummeted, NBC executives panicked. They canceled the show before its first full season ended. Many affiliates dropped it early, some even before the finale aired. In later interviews, the cast admitted they never stood a chance. The New Monkees was born into nostalgia and died in rejection. It remains a lesson in how quickly television can exploit and destroy its own creations. When culture evolves faster than studios can adapt, imitation becomes extinction. Number 1, The Paul Lynde Show, 1969. By the late 1960s, Paul Lynde was one of television's most recognizable personalities, a beloved regular on Hollywood squares, known for his biting wit and impeccable timing. ABC decided to give him his own sitcom, convinced his sharp humor could carry an entire show. What followed was one of the swiftest and most puzzling cancellations of the decade. The Paul Lynde Show followed a sarcastic father struggling to deal with his daughter's lazy, unemployed husband. It was meant to be a modern twist on the domestic comedies of the past, showcasing Lynde's signature acerbic style. But network executives panicked almost immediately. They feared Lynde's humor was too dry and too sharp for family audiences. Sponsors grew nervous that his delivery might alienate traditional viewers. Behind the scenes, Lynde clashed with producers over scripts, arguing that the material watered down his edge. The writers rewrote jokes daily to please censors and appease the network. The result was a sitcom that felt trapped between two worlds, too tame for adults and too cynical for children. Critics called it a lifeless imitation of earlier classics. ABC patience wore thin. Ratings plummeted after only a few episodes. Then, almost without warning, the show was gone. Cast members later said they found out through a newspaper headline. For Paul Lynde, it was a painful moment. He returned to guest appearances, but never again trusted network promises. The Paul Lynde Show became a haunting example of how talent can be both celebrated and crushed by the same industry. In one night, ABC silenced a voice that was simply too distinct for its time. 15 sitcoms, 15 vanished worlds of laughter and loss. Some were too daring, some too strange, and others simply misunderstood. Yet each reminds us that behind the smiles of television history lies a trail of silence and fear. Which of these cancellations shocked you most? Share your thoughts below, and remember to like, subscribe, and keep the past alive.